King Gray used to be the ruler of a large kingdom, but he's suddenly transported into the body of a baby in a world filled with magic, so he uses the learnings from his past life to become extremely overpowered and become this SSA rank adventurer. A man remarks that he had become king, the most powerful king. As he's drowning, a voice tells him to seek the light in his new life. He suddenly wakes up in front of a man and a woman who call him Arthur and happily say they're his parents. Stunned, Arthur wonders if he was just born. Arthur can't believe he's been reduced to a useless infant after his countless victories. Alice and Reynolds take good care of him and seem convinced that he's their child, and this body feels like a prison. He soon learns that there are powers in this world he's unfamiliar with. This society is one where individuals are allowed to own weapons. When Arthur can finally start crawling, he remarks that he still hasn't grown used to his new name. Now that he can move around, he goes to the bookshelf and takes out a book, inwardly saying knowledge is a weapon, and he had finally obtained what he was after. The continent he had been born on, Dicathan, contains 3 kingdoms: the Darv Kingdom, a subterranean nation of dwarves; Elanor, a nation of elves deep within a forest; and the Sapin Kingdom, where he lives, the most populous nation, full of humans. Compared to his previous life, this world still seems to be developing, and the technology here is pretty primitive. The key to controlling one's mana for magic is their mana core. Most spellcasters tap into their powers from the onset of puberty through late teens by channeling the disparate mana through their body into a single point. Arthur says he's acquainted with a similar concept. Kai. Becoming aware of your internal power, controlling it, and then unleashing it, the center of your ki, is crucial to doing all of that. Arthur starts trying to feel his core, but Alice picks him up. Later, she writes that it's been 2 years since Arthur was born, and he's the cutest boy in the world, but they've never seen him smile before. Reynolds is cheering, teaching Arthur to fight, but Alice annoyingly asks what he's doing and questions what's wrong with him. Over these 2 years, Arthur remarks that he's come to understand the power structure of this marriage. Alice takes Arthur to the town, and as they're heading back, he remarks that her and Reynolds have seen to his every need. As stifling as this life is, it's not unpleasant. When Arthur sees Reynolds' strength, he says he can't just stand around like this, but Alice reminds him that it's time for his nap, but reluctantly agrees to let him read for a bit as long as he doesn't annoy her. Arthur remarks that the most important knowledge he's gained the last 2 years is the ability to produce a mana core. Combining the countless fragments of mana into a single point was a task that took considerable effort, but it's finally paying off. As Alice and Reynolds are outside, the house suddenly explodes, so they hurriedly rush in to check on Arthur and are shocked to see that Arthur's already developed a mana core. The roof of the house is about to fall on him, but Reynolds hurriedly punches the debris away as Alice shields Arthur. Alice starts crying with joy, shocking Arthur, who doesn't understand why they're crying. He slowly starts shedding tears as well and admits this is something he wasn't able to learn from this world's literature, something he never learned in his past life. As Arthur and Reynolds are dueling, Reynolds offers him his gloves, but Arthur goes for a wooden sword instead, remarking that these would get him killed before he was within striking range. Arthur initially can't do anything against Reynolds' sword, but he manages to break it and happily smiles. Reynolds tells Alice that he thinks Arthur might need a proper teacher. She instantly declines and reminds him that he said he'd train him himself. Reynolds agrees but says Arthur is so talented that he'd have a lot to gain from a real mentor. He shows her that Arthur was able to cut through his sword when it was reinforced with mana, and he's only 4. Alice hurriedly says she's still against it and there's no way she can leave her sweet little Arthur in some far-off town. Reynolds tells her think about his future, but she declares that she's thinking about his present and questions if he doesn't want Arthur around. As they're arguing, Arthur decides to propose a third option and asks if they all can't go. Alice and Reynolds happily packing, and Arthur is surprised by how energetic they are. Later, Arthur introduces himself to a party and remarks that these are the Twin Horns, the party that Reynolds and Alice used to belong to. A guy introduces himself as Adam Crench, and another woman introduces herself as Angela Rose before introducing Durden Walker, Jasmine Flamesworth, and Helen Shard. They head out and Arthur is surprised by how primitive this world's transport is. They stop a while later and Arthur remarks that they're apparently headed for a city called Cyrus. It should prove interesting, but there's one issue that presents itself in the meantime. Some wolves approach them, so Jasmine steps forward and swiftly kills some while the other party members take the remaining wolves out. At night, they notice that Reynolds' arm got injured, so Alice steps forward to heal him. The Twin Horns quickly shield her from outside view as Arthur remarks that Alice is apparently a special type of mage called an emitter with healing powers. The rarity and value of her skill makes healing people in the open inadvisable, so she could become target, which is part of the reason she and Reynolds were living in the country. I highly doubt it is that rare. Adam asks if he can borrow Arthur since he was thinking of getting some training in before they sleep. Arthur wonders if he's forgotten that he's only 4 years old and rushes forward to attack. Surprised, Adam immediately goes on the defensive and throws him away. The party members tell Adam off for going overboard, so he hurriedly questions what kind of training they've made Arthur go through. The next morning, Arthur remarks that he's learning many new things, and sharing knowledge from his past life is also proving enlightening, but there's been one unexpected development. Jasmine's taken a liking to him. She gives him a dagger and says there's a rope here too. They continue their journey, but Arthur notices that Alice seems a bit sick. On the way, they're suddenly attacked by bandits. The leader orders his lackeys to leave the women and kid leave. The twin horns start fighting the bandits, and Arthur remarks that they have the advantage on an individual basis, but there's strength in numbers. Reynolds mutters that he's not hurt that badly but be in real trouble if the bandits learn about Alice's power. He tells Arthur to run away with his mom, so Arthur hurriedly argues that he can fight too. However, Reynolds tells him to use that strength to protect Alice since she's going to have another baby soon. Arthur realizes that is why she seemed sick and starts running with Alice while Reynolds fights the bandits' leader. Arthur remarks that after taking so much, he's on the run in order to avoid losing something, so this might be karma. As they're running, Arthur suddenly notices a caster near them readying a spell, so he hurriedly pushes Alice away and gets knocked back due to the wind spell. Arthur starts falling off of the mountain, but he attacks the caster with his knife and drags him down with him. Durden and Angela hurriedly try to spell save Arthur but don't reach far enough. As Arthur is falling, he remarks that this feels so strange, he's gained nothing but his heart feels fulfilled. He thinks he finally understands what that man was asking of him and why the two of them cried. He suddenly remembers that he was going to become an older brother and tearfully admits that would have been nice. Arthur shockingly finds himself standing in front of an armored giant and tries to attack, but she easily repels him and says he has a lot to learn still. She says he must be hungry, but even if he's not, he should eat something if he wants to be able to move again. She says he shouldn't move for now and tells him to consider himself lucky for having survived at all. Arthur slowly starts eating the fruit she had given him and asks if she knows if his parents are okay. She says she cannot move from here, but she can see a bit further than most. She shows him that his family is alive and continued their journey days ago. Arthur sheds a tear and happily says that's a relief before the giant lady introduces herself as Sylvia. A few days passed. Arthur's wounds healed and he wanted to return home as soon as possible, but it seems that isn't going to happen soon. According to Sylvia, they're on the edge of Elshire Forest, but Sylvia had a way to get around that. She says she knows Arthur wants to get back home as soon as possible, but creating a breach in space requires as much preparation as he might imagine. Sylvia is surprised to see that Arthur has a mana core at this age and asks if he can do this. Arthur is surprised to see that she's using magic while gathering mana at the same time. He admits he had no idea that was possible, so she says humans have many preconceptions about mana that leads them to make a distinction between gathering and using it, but it's very common. The creatures called mana beasts in particular do this sort of thing as easily as they breathe. She asks if he would like to learn how, so Arthur instantly says yes. In that case, Sylvia asks what he would like to do with the knowledge after learning it. Arthur thinks about it and says he would deliver death unto those who seek to deprive him of that which he cares about. However, Sylvia knocks him back and says she won't teach someone who has that look on their face. Arthur says killing enemies is what everyone does, but she questions if he enjoys having a head full of thoughts about killing his enemies. She says her hands can tear him to shreds, but they can also touch him gently, so she would rather him not use the life that she saved for violence. She asks what he will do with his power when he's become stronger than he is now, so he says he wants to protect the people he cares about. Arthur, who was King Grey in his past life, wakes up on a bed and meets a man named Marlon who's surprised to see him. He remarks that he was a king in name only, all political authority was in the hands of the parliament. As the nation's resources run dry and birth rates decline, the role of a king was to act as an executor for war, little more than a killing machine. Marlon asks what brings him here today, so Grey says he's done. Presently, Sylvia tells Arthur his ability to perform magic will expand and Arthur manages to master gathering mana while using it. Sylvia congratulates him but suddenly hides him in a bed of rocks. Shocked, Arthur wonders what's happening as a man who looks similar to Sylvia asks her to come with him. However, she refuses, so he says he was hoping violence wouldn't be necessary and attacks. The man asks Sylvia to stop since this will only harm her, but she reveals her true form and transforms into a dragon. The man hurriedly says using this power will cost her, but she says she doesn't mind. As the other giant is rushing towards her, Sylvia suddenly stops time and tells Arthur they need to hurry. Arthur notices the gash on Sylvia's body, but she opens a portal and says she has a few gifts for him. She gives him an egg and a feather and asks him to take good care of it. Arthur's arms suddenly get branded with a tattoo and Sylvia's says he'll know what these are for in time. Arthur tearfully realizes he can't protect her even though he made that promise, but she says this was always going to happen. Arthur declares that he doesn't care if he's a dragon and calls her family. She says he already has a mother, so he calls her his grandma, surprising her. As Arthur is being teleported, Sylvia asks him to let his new life be one filled with light. Arthur can sense people nearby, so he quickly hides the egg in his bag and jumps up on a tree. He finds some bandits who've caught some elf girls and realizes they'll sell her as a slave. Later, as the bandits set up camp, they discuss having some fun with the girl before selling her off, so Arthur realizes there's no guarantee she goes that long without being hurt and decides to prepare and wait for now. At night, Arthur sets off the forest hounds, and when a bandit comes over to check on them, Arthur quickly takes him down. He takes the dagger the man was holding and takes another bandit out before slashing through the leg of one more. However, he shouts that Arthur's a mage. The leader cheerily says he'd betterment to kill the golden egg that just fell into his lap. He kicks Arthur away and orders him to just give up, but Arthur incinerates his leg. Infuriated, the man says he's done trying to take him alive, but Arthur swiftly stabs him in the head. The remaining man desperately asks Arthur to stop, but he says he's sure the girl also said the same thing to them. Arthur unties the girl inside the cart and helps her out before saying she can go home. He realizes this is the first time he's been around a child his age. She slowly asks what happened to the people who kidnapped her, so Arthur says they had an unfortunate accident and assures her that she's safe now. He starts leaving, but the girl stops him since she's scared, so Arthur admits he can't just leave her here. She suggests that they should let the hounds go, and Arthur's initially worried, but they don't attack. They leave to take the girl home, and she introduces herself as Tessia. She asks why he's in the forest of Elshire, so he says he got separated from his family. As they're walking, Tessia tells Arthur about herself and says once her man awakens, she's going to train at her master's place. Arthur sets up a tent at night, but Tessia points out that beasts that he will notice that he's a kid and attack them, and asks him to keep watch from inside the tent, so he agrees. She asks if he's from the human kingdom and says she'd heard humans are all creeps and have a lot of wives, so Arthur says he's pretty sure some elves are creeps too. As they continue their journey, Arthur remarks that Tessia has grown so comfortable around him that it seems she's forgotten all about the slavers. Sounds like a good thing. Arthur suddenly feels an unbearable pain in his mana core, so Tessia hurriedly goes to look for herbs that might help. The pain didn't get any better, and the duration between attacks got shorter, and Arthur is surprised to see a hound they freed before bring him some prey. The next day, as they're walking, Tessia asks Arthur if she can call him right since they've gotten pretty close, so he says that's fine. They suddenly reach a huge tree with a portal, so Tessia excitedly goes through it and gives Arthur a hand. When they enter Elanor, guards immediately capture Arthur and think he was the one who kidnapped Tessia. Tessia hurriedly tries to stop them, but they think she's been brainwashed. However, an old man suddenly appears in front of them and orders the guards to let Arthur go. He introduces himself as the former ruler of the kingdom of Elanor, Earlith, and thanks Arthur for helping Tessia. Arthur is surprised to hear that Tessia is the princess of Elanor. The king orders for Arthur to be captured, but Tessia insists that he saved her, so they have to show him hospitality at their castle. As Arthur is walking with Tessia, he notices that elves and humans seem to be in a state of touch and go hostility. Tessia's parents sit down with Arthur at a table and formally introduce themselves. Arthur tells them everything while leaving out certain parts, but the guards don't believe he was strong enough to beat the slavers and think he deceived Tessia while she was lost, but Virion stops them. Tessia's father, Alduin, agrees to have soldiers escort Arthur to the Sapin kingdom, and Arthur suddenly feels another bout of pain. Later, Tessia apologizes to Arthur for how her parents acted towards him and says she's sure his parents will be happy to see him when he returns. Arthur suddenly senses someone hostile near them and rushes towards them, but Virion easily stops him. Surprised, Arthur questions how he could do that and if he was trying to kill his own granddaughter. However, Virion reveals that it was just a trick and sees that Arthur really did fight the slavers. Tessia asks Virion to stop picking on Arthur, so he says he doesn't have time for that. He just hasn't taken this kind of interest in someone in a long time. He throws Arthur a sword and they start sparring. Arthur manages to land a blow on him, so Virion admits he certainly wasn't expecting him to get the better of him. He says they should begin the second round now, but Tessia stops him and annoyingly says he's supposed to hold back during this kind of thing. Virion points out that Arthur would have ended up bullying him if he'd done that. Arthur says it's an honor to hear him overestimate him, so Virion says if he really believes that he should become his apprentice. Surprised, Arthur slowly asks if he's being serious, so Virion says he wouldn't make this kind of offer in jest. Arthur understands that but says his parents still don't know that he's alive, so Virion asks if he'd be willing to agree if there was a way to let his parents know that he's fine. Arthur is considering it when he suddenly starts feeling the pain in his chest again. Virion says he can tell Arthur's inherited a beast will and tells Arthur to become his apprentice because if he doesn't, he'll die. Arthur's having a nightmare when Tessia hurriedly wakes him up and tells him to hurry up and get ready since Virion is waiting. She asks if it's true that he's staying, so he says he's not sure, but he'll know once they get back from the trip. Alduin is arguing with Virion as Tessia and Arthur arrive. He says Virion should know that humans don't belong in Elanor and allowing him to stay here goes against their traditions, but Virion says he's taken a liking to the boy. Virion, Tessia and Arthur get on a cart and leave. Tessia falls asleep on the way, so Virion says she woke early today and was rather persistent in trying to learn about what would happen to him. He explains that due to her position as the sole heir to the throne, she's led a rather isolated life and has had her heart broken by superficial friends, both adults and children. As a result, she doesn't get close to anyone and leaves her emotional walls up, but she smiles naturally when she's with Arthur, so he wants to thank him for that. They reach a house, so Arthur wonders just who this person is for a former king like Virion to travel this far to see. Virion kicks the door, so a woman annoyingly gets out and says he doesn't need to yell. Virion introduces her as his old friend, Rinia Darkasan, and says she's a sorcerer with unique skills. She invites them in and Arthur wonders just how she can help him. He formally says he was told by Virion that she has a spell that will help him contact his parents. She says she's a diviner and knows he's a special child since there's something about him that even she can't see. She knows he came here to talk to his parents and let them know he's alright. She orders him to look into the water and imagine his parents as clearly as he can, like he is on Discord video chat. Alice and Reynolds are depressingly thinking about Arthur before they suddenly hear him talking to them. Arthur assures them that he's alive and is with the elves in the kingdom of Elanor. He apologetically says he wants to get back as soon as she can, but he can't since there's something wrong with his body and he needs treatment. He reassures them it's nothing serious and he'll come back to them once he's better. He asks them to not blame themselves for what happened since he would have done what he did anyway, even if it had killed him. He says he doesn't know when he'll be able to contact them next, but tells them to not worry and look after themselves. Once the call ends, Arthur wipes off his tears and asks Virion to take him in as his apprentice. Later, Tessia angrily asks Alduin how many times she needs to say that Arthur saved her life twice, and if they chase him off, people will think that elves are ungrateful. Virion agrees with her and says Arthur will be under his tutelage, so if anything happens, he'll take responsibility. Alduin apologizes to Arthur and admits sitting on the throne for as long as he has made him stubborn and set in his ways. He officially welcomes him and his wife asks Arthur to think of this place as his own home. Arthur shakes Alduin's hand before Tessia says he should let them play outside if he really feels bad. In the market, Arthur accidentally runs into a boy who calls him disgusting and says Lord Virion might have taken a liking to him, but this is no place for humans. Arthur doesn't think he's ever seen a more predictable little pest. The boy tells Tessia fraternizing with a human will hurt her reputation and asks her to allow himself, Fairith Ivsir, to escort her instead. Arthur teases him and starts to leave, but Fairith angrily challenges him to a duel. Arthur accepts, but when the duel begins, he effortlessly punches Fairith in the face, defeating him. Tessia cheerily says they should run and grabs his hand. They spend the day hanging out with each other, and Arthur remembers how Virion told him that his training was going to be extremely hard, but if he endures it all, he'll have much to gain. Arthur excitedly says he's looking forward to it, so Tessia says she'll work hard too. Later, Arthur faces off against Virion and gotten stronger in this new world, but the path has had its share of trials, and it seems that things will only grow more difficult the further he goes. But for now, he will focus on what's in front of him, because he understands that the future is going to be exciting. A few years have passed as Tessia and Arthur spar with each other. Virion smiles and remarks that they're ready for the next phase. Virion explains that they'll begin with sorcery and says that they'll soon be able to master one of the four elements: fire, water, wind, and earth. Elves specialize in wind as well as water and earth. Dwarves in comparison show an affinity for earth and fire, while humans have a capability for all of them, but most people are capable of only using one. On rare occasions, some are capable of using multiple elements, but they're the exception. Tessia asks why Arhather hasn't been using sorcery while doing physical training, so Virion says it's because a beast was slumbering inside Arthur's mana core, and it's upsetting his body and balance between the mana, which is why the first step was to have his mana assimilate with his body. It's said that if an elf awakens their mana by the age of 10, they're considered gifted. Tessia's came to her at 9, and she's been learning how to fight ever since. Virion says they're going to awaken the beast will inside of Arthur if he still has strength to spare, so if this works, he doesn't need to worry about that pain anymore. Virion starts igniting Arthur's mana core, but they're suddenly thrown back when Arthur's body starts glowing yellow. Arthur later wakes up in a bed to see Virion sitting beside him. He asks Arthur if he has any idea where his beast will came from, so Arthur slowly reveals that she was a dragon. Stunned, Virion orders Arthur not tell anyone this. The will of a dragon is bound to draw unwanted conflict. Arthur agrees and cheerily says he appreciates him worrying about him. Putting that aside, Virion says Arthur's deportation is set 4 months from now. Surprised, Arthur hurriedly gets up and says he thought he had 2 years left, but Virion explains that the 3 kingdoms are holding a cultural exchange where young people from all 3 kingdoms are meant to interact, and the entrance to Cyrus will be open during that. As Arthur is lying in bed, the egg he'd received from Sylvia suddenly starts glowing, and a baby dragon comes out from inside it. Arthur is surprised to realize the dragon can talk to him inside his head, and that the dragon calls him Papa. He cheerily decides to name her after her mother Sylvia and goes to sleep. The next morning, Arthur wakes up to see Tessia happily holding Sylvia in her arms and calling her cute, so he wearily goes back to sleep. Virion is shocked to see Sylvia and says this kind of stuff is bad for his heart. They begin today's training, and Virion tells Arthur he'll need to exercise his beast core and mana core simultaneously, and the most effective way to do that is in combat. Virion suddenly covers himself in black smoke and Arthur instantly surrenders. Virion transforms back into his normal form, so Arthur says the way he moved was impressive enough, but he couldn't sense where Virion was at all. Days pass and Arthur starts to master the beast will. His body has also grown strong enough to withstand training that had seemed unbearable before, and when he had time to spare, he spent it like a normal child. Arthur heads to the market with Tessia and runs into Ferrith again, who challenges him to a duel once again, but Arthur easily defeats him again. He offers Ferrith his hand and says it's great to see him again, so Ferrith slowly takes it. Ferrith says Tessia can't go to the exchange with Cyrus since she's so delicate hearing, which Tessia punches him in the face. Arthur hurriedly grabs her hand and runs away. He tells her off for slugging her subjects like this, so she angrily says he's leaving soon, and she can't even attend the exchange. As she's sitting alone at night, Arthur asks if she wants to go to the woods like they used to. They set up a campfire and Tessia slowly starts to fall asleep. She asks Arthur what the human kingdom is like, so he admits he's not sure since he didn't really see much of it. In that case, she asks if he can't stay here, and Arthur starts to answer, but he notices that she's fast asleep. The next morning, as Arthur is leaving, Virion gives him a compass with the Arolith family seal so that he can return to Elanor without any issues. Arthur doesn't see Tessia anywhere, but as he's about to leave, she hurriedly runs up to him. She trips and falls, so Arthur gives her a hand. She's telling him to be careful when Arthur hugs her and says he'll miss her. Surprised, she starts crying and admits she'll miss him too. Arthur gets off the carriage at Cyrus and says goodbye to the elves. He nervously knocks on the door and is surprised to see a little girl Alice or it before Reynolds hurry after her to check. Shocked, Elise and Reynolds happily embrace Arthur, after which he introduces himself to his little sister Elanor. Once things settled down, Arthur told Alice and Reynolds about everything that happened, and while he trusts them, he left out the part where he met Sylvia. He told them about how he met Tessia and explains that his sickness was caused by the fact that his mana core awakened too early and became unstable. After they learn about Sylvia, Reynolds asks Arthur what stage his mana core is at. He reveals that he's been working at the Helstia auction house and hit deep orange 2 years ago. Arthur is confused, so Reynolds explains that the color of mana cores goes from black, red, orange, yellow, silver, and white. Arthur slowly reveals that he's at light red, surprising Reynolds, who sees that he's almost caught up to him. A man and his family suddenly enter, asking if it's true that Reynolds' son is alive, so Reynolds introduces the man as Vincent Helstia to Arthur. Vincent's wife, Tabitha, introduces Arthur to her daughter, Lilia, who instantly falls in love with Sylvia. Reynolds and Arthur decide to spar in the background, and Reynolds reveals that he can fully control fire, so Arthur decides to use advanced fire magic and summons lightning before attacking Reynolds with water. He really wants to electrocute this man to death. Reynolds cheerily praises Arthur, so Arthur says he can just barely control it. Later, as they're eating, Vincent suggests that Reynolds should enroll Arthur at the Cyrus Academy, and Tabitha says they'd be willing to invest in his future, so they don't need to worry about tuition either. Alice isn't sure if they'll accept Arthur since he's only 8, so Vince says he's actually familiar with the director of Cyrus Academy, and he can talk to her. However, Arthur interjects and says he just met his family and is pretty tired from the sparring, so he'd like some time. As Arthur is walking, Lilia says he'll end up getting lost in the basement if he goes this way. She takes him to the house carrying staff, and the maids inform him that Lilia comes here when she's feeling stressed. Alice and Reynolds bid Arthur good night, and Reynolds assures him what Vincent said was out of concern for him. Arthur says he knows he didn't mean anything bad by it. The next morning, he goes to find the twin horns, who happily greet him. Jasmine tearfully hugs Arthur and admits it was her mistake, surprising him. As the twin horns are talking about their recent trip, Arthur realizes he knows next to nothing about Dickaden or the kingdom of Sapin. Arthur stops time for a moment and lets it go. He falls to the ground and warily wonders if he should be pursuing a different option. However, he tells himself he needs to master this power to protect the people he loves. As Arthur is bathing Sylvia, he remarks that the Helsties have certainly reaped the benefits of running their auction house. Once he's cleaned Sylvia, Arthur's family takes him to a barber so that he can get a haircut, after which Tabitha says they'll show him around the city today. Some boys pick on Arthur for a bit, and Lilia says they're from Cyrus. She reveals that wearing one of the uniforms practically makes you royalty around here. Arthur is looking at some beast cores, so Tabitha explains explains that they're very expensive. Lilia wants one, but Tabitha says it's not a shortcut to becoming a sorcerer, and buying something so expensive for a child doesn't make any sense. Arthur remarks that it doesn't seem like Tabitha is actually pressuring Lilia and wonders what's troubling her. Arthur finds her looking at some beast cores and stops, so she annoyingly says he won't get it since he's special. He says they should talk this over, but she knocks his hand away and gets shoved back a little by the sheer aura of this protagonist. She crashes into some boys from Cyrus Academy who decide to bully them. Arthur is bracing himself to fight them, but Tabitha suddenly appears and questions what they'll do if the director finds out they're bullying the daughter of the Hellstius hearing, which the boys quickly leave. When they get back home, Vincent assures Arthur this won't affect him going to Cyrus Academy hearing, which Lilia angrily asks if he's saying he wants to send Arthur instead of her just because she hasn't awakened yet. She angrily says she hates him and Arthur and runs away. Arthur knocks on the door to Lilia's room, but doesn't hear anything inside, so a butler takes him to the staff's department. Arthur tells Lilia her parents are worried about her, so she apologizes for being jealous of him. Arthur says she should know better, even he can tell how hard she's been trying. He assures her that her mom and dad know how hard she's trying, and says Vincent's only interested in him because he just arrived. Later, Arthur tells Vincent and Tabitha he's sent Lilia to the place where he trained at since that was what she wanted. Stunned, Vincent reads a letter from Lilia and realizes he's been a fool. However, Lilia suddenly appears and apologizes to them for lying. Arthur apologizes too, but Vincent admits he was the one who was insensitive and tells Lilia she doesn't have to attend the academy if she doesn't want to. However, Lilia says she wants to learn magic even if she can't do it right away. The family happily hugs each other, so Arthur says he'll help awaken Lilia's mana. He makes Elanor and Lilia sit down with their backs to each other and guides them for a few moments before Lilia starts sensing mana. Later, the staff happily celebrates, and the maid makes some duck for Lilia to congratulate her. Arthur says it might take 2 or 3 years for it to stabilize, but she should keep at it every day. The Hellsties and Leywins arrive at the Hellstia auction house, and Arthur is surprised by how different Reynolds seems today. Vincent gets up on a stage and introduces the guests of honor: King Blaine Glader, Queen Priscilla, Prince Curtis, and Princess Kathleen. As the auction is taking place, Arthur notices that Sylvie's missing and goes to find her. A lion cub is up for sale next, and Curtis instantly says he wants it, so Blaine offers 1,000 gold coins for it, and no one's willing to offer a higher price since he'd publicly execute them if they did. A conjurer is trying to take Sylvie, but Arthur calls out her name and remarks that it'll be a problem if this man causes a scene. He politely asks the man to return Sylvie to him since she's his partner. Sylvie quickly climbs on Arthur's shoulder, but the man tells him to leave her behind, saying he's long sought a mana beast worthy of his abilities and can tap into her full potential. He fires a blast of fire as a warning and orders Sylvie to be grateful and obey since he's offering her a chance to contract with him. Arthur remarks that this is pointless and starts heading back, so the man asks if he's aware of what happens if a person defies the royal family and warns that his family will be held responsible. Hearing this, Arthur menacingly asks him to say that again and unleashes his bloodlust. As the man collapses to the ground, Arthur realizes he let his emotions get the better of him. The guests hurriedly leave, so Blaine says he wants to talk to the head of security. He tells Reynolds that this unfortunately necessitates disciplinary action. However, the conjurer says he believes a merciful response would be fair in this case and that he'd be able to raise Arthur's mana beast in an ideal environment. Blaine says the conjurer, Sebastian, has saved his family countless times and has been working for them for years, so the mana beast should be enough. Reynolds apologizes again and admits he had no hand in Arthur obtaining this beast. Arthur apologizes and says he cannot agree to this, so Blaine offers an exchange with the lion cub. Arthur apologizes again and says he has no intention of letting go of Sylvie. He asks Blaine if he would ever sell his own children, hearing which Sebastian orders the guards to attack Arthur. However, Arthur easily takes them down, so Sebastian attacks him with a spell. Arthur instantly stops time and breaks Sebastian's leg before warning that he should know the position he's in. When time resumes, Arthur falls unconscious and wakes up on his bed. He goes out with Alice and learns that her products are actually really popular with the citizens of Cyrus. She does some shopping, and when they return, Arthur hears Reynolds arguing with a representative sent by the king. He heads in and the man gives them a pouch of gold the king has sent as reconciliation for the incident. He adds that the guards who attacked Arthur yesterday were relieved of their position, as well as Sebastian, who was saying Arthur was the one who attacked him. Reynolds hurriedly says that's impossible, so the man says they've concluded one of the spells got reflected back at Sebastian. When the man leaves, Reynolds tells Arthur to take the gold. That night, Arthur remarks that this has reminded him he's still just a child in this world. If he wants to defy the power of whole nations, he'll need to make use of something comparable. The next morning, as Arthur is walking. He finds a strange-looking owl and goes after it to arrive at a clearing where a woman says she's been waiting for him. Cyrus Academy is famous for having produced scholars, entrepreneurs, royal guards, public leaders, and military officers, and now Arthur has encountered the director who holds all authority. She says she's curious about whether or not Vincent was exaggerating and decides to take a look. Arthur decides to show off first and uses wind magic to throw some rocks, but she easily stops them. Surprised, Arthur remarks that he's still not getting as much firepower with wind as he does with fire and water. In that case, he rushes in close to attack, but she blocks him again. The director says he might overestimate his strength a bit, but he's definitely remarkable in both sorcery and combat skills. She tells him to try not to lose consciousness and starts attacking with sound. Arthur manages to bear it, so she says he's passed and asks what he has to tell her, considering he came all this way to show her his power. Arthur admits she's right and says he's here because he needs the influence and authority that she possesses to protect his willing. If she's willing to share them with him, he'll enroll at the academy. She smilingly says she hopes he realizes even the royal family hasn't tried such a blunt negotiation before, so Arthur says he believes what he's offering is worth her while. However, if he's going to enroll, he thinks it should be when he's the same age as most students. The director says he'd be much stronger if his studies began now, but Arthur says he wants to live his life to the fullest by becoming an adventurer. The director agrees and says they'll complete the deal when he tells his family. Alice instantly declines, so Reynolds asks her to calm down and says they should at least hear Arthur out. Alice questions how he can say that after what they've been through, so Reynolds says he's been thinking about that and suggests that Arthur could go with someone to protect him. Arthur assures them that he'll return home every once in a while. He says he loves being home, but he wants to explore Dick Ethan since there's so much that he still doesn't know. Bro can't just go on Wikipedia, can he? Reynolds suggests again that they can send someone they trust with him. They ask the Twin Horns if any of them is up for it, and Jasmine agrees. The party thinks she's the best choice too since she's an orange level augmenter, so Arthur says he looks forward to it. Arthur heads to the auction house next to pick out a sword, but even though he spends a while there, he doesn't like any of them. Sylvia takes him to what seems to be a staff, but the weight is too unbalanced, so Arthur guesses it's a sword. He uses magic to take it out in his Mac and is surprised by how beautiful it is. He sees that it's named the Dawn's Ballad, and it surprisingly changes its balance so that it can be wielded by him more easily. When Reynolds and Vincent arrive, Arthur picks out a random sword and says the Dawn's Ballad was just a random staff lying on the ground he thought he could use for practice. Some time passes, and on Arthur's 9th birthday, Alice gives him some gloves fitting with healing magic stones she made herself. Vincent also gifts Arthur and Alice a pair of rings, saying that if Arthur's mana ever reaches a dangerously low level, Alice's ring will light up. The Twin Horns also give him a scroll he can use to leave Alice a message. In his room, Arthur remarks that something he was thinking about has been confirmed today. In this current life, he has family and friends who love him. He never wants to lose the feeling of security that gives him and cares about them more than anything else, so he will fight with everything he has in their defense. For that, he needs to become stronger than he was in his past life. This guy blabbers on about becoming strong so much that I'm starting to think there are actual assassins after him. As Arthur is about to leave, Reynolds says he's a strong boy, but he shouldn't try to solve everything on his own and should remember to rely on Jasmine. Alice hugs him and assures him they'll be fine, so Arthur heads out with Jason. Arthur and Jasmine head to the Adventurers Guild's front desk for a rank assessment, and Arthur is taken to a separate room. The receptionist takes them to the chief of the Adventurer Guild's Cyrus branch, Caspian Bladeheart, and says there's usually some extra exams, but since Jasmine Flamesworth is recommending, they'll skip those formalities. He asks Arthur what he should call him, so Arthur introduces himself as Note. They head to the exam hall, and Arthur learns that Jasmine's father has some connections. She notices that Sylvie looks a bit different, so Arthur says he noticed recently that she can change her appearance a little. They take a seat in the stands as a girl is given C class. Jasmine says that's pretty promising for her age. A boy named Elijah Knight steps up, but they don't have him take an exam and instantly assign him a B rank. Lucas Weick steps forward next and asks if he can just be assigned A rank now. He steps forward and unleashes a massive attack, but he isn't able to control it, so the examiner stops him. She says his spell casting is really good, but Lucas tries to attack before she can finish, so Arthur throws his sword in front of him. The examiner says this is his biggest weakness and names him a B-class adventurer. Lucas annoyingly says this isn't over, so he's taken away. Arthur steps up next, and Caspian Bladeheart says he'll take care of this examination. An assistant says an AA-class sorcerer such as himself administering an exam personally is unheard of, so Arthur smiles beneath his mask. Later, Arthur is registered as a B-class adventurer, and the examiners tell Caspian so many young B-class adventurers in one day is insane. Caspian tells them elves and dwarves are now recognized as adventurers by Sapin. Lucas Weick's is a half-elf. The Weicks have long since been known for their questionable methods, so he's pretty sure Lucas's mother was an elf slave. Elijah Knight, on the other hand, is a human who was raised by dwarves and was sent here to become accustomed humans as the first representative of the Darv Kingdom. They ask about the masked examiner Caspian fought, so he says they know even less about him, but the fact that he was recommended by someone from the Flamesworth family is very interesting. Jasmine asks asks Arthur if he's fine since he's spacing out, so he remarks that his duel with Caspian made something clear. He's grown too accustomed to the powers this world affords him and is neglecting the diligence that brought his strength in his past life. As Arthur's walking, Elijah says what he did to Lucas was reckless, but he'd have done it as well. Lucas tells Arthur to not get too cocky, since there are different levels even in the same ranks, but the people around them start to stare, so he annoyingly leaves. Jasmine takes Arthur to an outside area, but says this has been thoroughly explored, so lower class adventurers come here to train or collect material they'll need for quests. She says they should get going, and Arthur is surprised by how fast she is even though he's never underestimated her. They suddenly notice some commotion near them, and some giant monsters start attacking adventurers, so Jasmine says they should run. She wonders what this monster is doing here, since it's not even native to this area. They realize the monster was captured alive, but it escaped and quickly dodged its attacks. Jasmine starts fighting the monster, but she's about to be hit, so Arthur hurriedly saves her. As she continues fighting it, Arthur is about to rush in as well, but his past self tells him to wait for the right moment. When he senses it, he powers up his sword with fire and swiftly kills the monster. Later, Jasmine says she wishes Arthur looked a little more worried in situations like that. That might sound weird, though, coming from her, so Arthur wonders where he made the wrong assumption. As they're sitting around a campfire at night, Jasmine reveals that she became an adventurer to get away from her family. The Flameswords have produced powerful sorcerers for generations, and she was always taught that fire magic was the strongest. They had high expectations for her, but when they realized she had new talent with fire magic, they started calling her a failure. They do know that there are like 3 other elements, right? Arthur gets angry on her behalf, so she chuckles and says the Twin Horns taught her everything about coordinating and connecting with other people. As Jasmine is sleeping, Arthur wonders if someone like him can change, but he tells himself he will for the people he loves. Tessia is spying on Arthur from Elanor when Virion suggests that she should try something new if she wants to become strong too. 2 years later, some adventurers at a bar are talking about the rumors surrounding a guy who's apparently really strong. Someone says they heard he's traveling with the Flamesworth girl, while Jasmine tells Arthur to come down and they head out.